You felt this before. You're alone in a room. Maybe the house is quiet. Maybe everyone has gone to bed. And there's this feeling that creeps in. Something between peace and discomfort. You're not sure what to do with yourself. So you turn on the TV. Or you pick up your phone. Or you find something to clean. Anything to fill the silence. Most people do this. And most people don't stop to ask why. Because being alone, really alone, with no noise, no distraction, no one to talk to, can feel uncomfortable. It can feel like something is missing, like you're supposed to be doing something, like silence means something is wrong. But here's what I want to talk to you about today. That discomfort you feel, it's not a problem. It's actually a door. Not a door to something complicated or mysterious. Just a door to yourself. To the thoughts you've been too busy to hear. To the feelings you've been pushing aside for weeks, maybe years. To a quieter, clearer version of who you are. Now, I'm not going to tell you that being alone is always easy. It's not. And I'm not going to pretend that loneliness doesn't hurt, because sometimes it really does. But there's a difference between loneliness and solitude. And most people have never been taught that difference. Loneliness is when you feel like you need someone and they're not there. It's a feeling of something missing. It can be painful, and it's real. Solitude is different. Solitude is when you're alone, and you choose to be okay with that. When you stop fighting the quiet. When you let yourself just sit, just be, without needing anything from anyone. And when you learn to do that, even for a few minutes a day, something changes. You start to know yourself better. You start to hear what you actually want, not what others want for you, not what the world tells you to want, but what you want. That's not a small thing. That's everything. If you're enjoying this message, subscribe, leave a like, and share this with someone who needs it. Now, let's continue. And the real reason this feels so hard is not what most people think. Let me ask you something simple. When was the last time you sat in complete silence and felt fine? Not anxious, not restless, not reaching for your phone within 30 seconds, just fine. For most people, that's hard to answer, because we've built our lives around noise and company and activity. We wake up to alarms. We fill the morning with coffee and news and conversation. We go through the day surrounded by people, tasks, sounds. And at night, we put on something to watch just to fall asleep. There's always something going on. And we've gotten so used to that when the noise stops, even for a moment, it feels strange. It feels like something went wrong. But here's what I want you to understand. That constant need for noise, it didn't just happen. It was learned. From a very young age, most of us were taught that being around people is good, and being alone is bad. We were rewarded for being social. We were asked, "Are you okay?" when we sat by ourselves too long. We grew up thinking that connection with others meant we were okay, and that being alone meant we were not. And after decades of living that way, the idea of choosing to be alone, really alone, on purpose, without guilt, feels almost wrong. It feels selfish, or sad, or like giving up. But it's none of those things. Choosing to spend time alone is one of the most honest things you can do for yourself. It's saying, I want to know who I am when no one is watching. I want to hear my own thoughts. I want to sit with my own feelings, not perform for anyone, not manage anyone, not take care of anyone. Just be. A lot of people reach their 50s or 60s and realize they've never really done that. They've been a parent, a spouse, a worker, a friend, but they don't know who they are when all those roles disappear. That's not a failure. It's just what happens when we're never taught to be alone. And the good news is, it's never too late to learn. Have you felt this? That sense that you've been living for everyone else and somehow lost track of yourself?
But there's something deeper here.
And it starts with what silence is actually trying to tell you. Most people think silence is empty. They think quiet means nothing is happening. That when there's no conversation, no task, no plan, nothing of value is going on. But silence is not empty. Silence is actually full. It's full of things you haven't had time to hear. Thoughts that are waiting. Feelings that have been sitting there for a while, quietly, hoping you'll slow down long enough to notice them. Think about your daily life for a moment. You wake up. You have responsibilities. There are people who need things from you. There are tasks. There's a schedule. And from the moment you open your eyes, you're reacting to messages, to needs, to plans, to problems. By the time the day is over, you're tired. Not just physically, mentally tired, emotionally tired. The kind of tired that sleep doesn't always fix. That tiredness. A lot of it comes from never stopping, never pausing, never giving yourself a moment where you're not needed by anyone. And what happens when you don't pause? You lose touch with yourself, slowly, without even noticing. You start making decisions based on habit, not on what you actually want. You say yes when you want to say no, not because you're afraid, but because you haven't stopped long enough to ask yourself what you really feel. You keep going, and going, and going, until one day you feel a kind of emptiness. Not sadness exactly, more like hollowness. Like something is missing, but you can't name what it is. A lot of people feel this in their 40s, 50s, and beyond, and they try to fill it with more activity, more company, more noise. But it doesn't go away. Because what's missing isn't something outside of you. It's the relationship with yourself. The quiet, honest, simple knowing of who you are and what you feel. And you can't find that in the noise. You can only find it in the silence. Even 5 minutes of real quiet, no phone, no TV, no tasks, can start to shift something inside you. You start to hear yourself again. And that changes things. Does this sound familiar? Have you noticed that you're always on and never really resting? But it doesn't stop there, because what silence reveals is only the beginning. Here's something that surprises a lot of people. Being alone is not the same as being lonely. I know those words feel similar, but they describe two very different things. And understanding the difference can genuinely change how you live. Loneliness is a feeling. It's that ache of wanting connection and not having it. It's wanting someone to call who isn't there. Wanting to share something with someone and having no one to share it with. Loneliness is painful, and it's real. No one should dismiss it. But solitude? Solitude is a choice. It's different. Solitude is when you decide to be alone. Not because no one wants you, but because you want time with yourself. It's choosing quiet on purpose. It's saying, right now, I don't need anything from anyone. I'm just going to be here with myself. And when you start to make that choice, even in small ways, something shifts. You stop feeling like being alone is something that happens to you. You start feeling like it's something you're doing for yourself. That's a big change. And a lot of people over 45 have never experienced it. Because for years, maybe decades, being alone wasn't really a choice. You were either with your family, at work, taking care of someone, or trying not to be alone because it felt too uncomfortable. Solitude was never really explained as a tool, as something useful, as something worth choosing. But here's what I've seen over and over. The people who feel most at peace, not happy all the time, but genuinely at peace, are the ones who have learned to be alone without feeling bad about it. They don't need constant company to feel okay. They don't need noise to feel safe. They can sit with themselves and feel maybe not perfect, maybe not completely without worry, but okay, present, grounded. That's not a gift some people are born with. That's something you build, slowly, with practice. By choosing solitude, even when it feels strange at first. And the first step is simply deciding that your own company is worth having. Have you ever thought of yourself that way, as someone worth spending time with? And this is where most people get hurt, because they never learnt to see themselves that way. Let me say something that might feel a little uncomfortable at first. Most of us were never taught to like our own company. Not really. We were taught to be good to others, to listen, to help, to show up for the people we love. And those are good things, genuinely good things. But somewhere in all of that, the idea of being kind to yourself, of actually enjoying time with yourself, got left out. In fact, for a lot of people, being alone comes with a kind of inner voice that isn't very kind at all. The moment the noise stops, the moment there's no one to talk to and nothing to do, the thoughts that show up aren't always gentle. Maybe it's old regrets, things you wish you'd done differently, relationships that didn't work out, choices you're still not sure about. Maybe it's criticism, that voice that says you should have done more, been better, worked harder. Maybe it's just a low hum of worry about money, about health, about family, about what comes next. For a lot of people, that's what waits in the silence. And that's exactly why they fill it with noise. Because if you never stop, if there's always something to watch, something to do, someone to talk to, then those thoughts never get too loud. But here's the problem. Avoiding your own thoughts doesn't make them go away. They're still there. They just build up over time under the surface. And they come out in other ways, in irritability, in restlessness, in that low-grade tiredness that never quite leaves. The only way through is through. Not dramatically, not all at once, but slowly, gently, learning to sit with yourself, learning to hear those thoughts without being destroyed by them, learning to say, yes, that's a worry, yes, that's a regret, and I'm still okay. That's what time alone can teach you. Not avoidance, not running from your thoughts, but learning that your thoughts are not in charge of you. You can hear them, acknowledge them, and then let them settle, like dust in a room that finally gets still.
Does that make sense?
Have you noticed how different you feel after real quiet, compared to just collapsing in front of the TV? But here's the part most people overlook, and it's the part that makes all the difference. Something happens when you spend regular time alone. You start to know what you actually think. That sounds simple, maybe even obvious. But for a lot of people, especially those who have spent years focused on family, work, and responsibility, It's actually quite rare. When you're always around others, your thoughts get mixed up with theirs. You absorb opinions without realizing it. You start agreeing with things not because you believe them, but because it's easier. Because you've heard them so many times, they feel like your own. And slowly, over years, you can lose track of what you actually believe, what you actually value, what actually matters to you, not to your partner, not to your children, not to your friends, but to you.
This happens to a lot of people in their 50s and 60s. They look up one day and realize they've been living by a set of ideas they never really chose. Rules about how to live, what to value, what a good life looks like. And they're not sure any of those rules were actually theirs. That's not anyone's fault. It's just what happens when there's never any quiet. Because quiet is where your own voice lives. When you sit alone, really alone, without distraction, your own thoughts start to rise to the surface. Not the thoughts you're supposed to have, not the opinions of the people around you. Your thoughts. What do I actually enjoy? What kind of people make me feel good? What am I doing that I don't want to do anymore? What have I always wanted to try, but never gave myself permission to? These are not dramatic questions. They're just honest ones. And they don't get answered in the noise. They get answered in the quiet.
A lot of people avoid this because they're afraid of what they might discover. Maybe they'll realize they've been unhappy about something for a long time. Maybe they'll want to change something. And change feels scary. But knowing the truth about yourself is never a bad thing. It's always, always better than not knowing. And the truth, your truth, only shows up when you get quiet enough to hear it. Have you ever had a moment like that, where you heard something honest from inside yourself, something you'd been ignoring? But it gets clearer once you see the next part. Let's talk about something very practical. A lot of people say they want more quiet. They say they'd like to slow down, spend more time alone, get to know themselves better. And they mean it. But then life happens, and the quiet never comes. Because quiet has to be made. It doesn't just appear.
This is something worth understanding,
Especially if you're over 45 and your life is full of family, full of responsibilities, full of the needs of others. No one is going to hand you time to be alone. You have to choose it. And that can feel selfish, I know. Because most of the people watching this have spent a long time putting others first. You've been the one who shows up, the one who helps, the one who keeps things running. And taking an hour, or even 20 minutes, just for yourself, can feel like you're taking something away from everyone else. But here's what I want you to hear. You cannot give from empty, and you cannot know what you really have to give until you've spent some time with yourself. The most generous, present, warm people are not the ones who give everything and keep nothing for themselves. They're the ones who take care of themselves enough that they actually have something to offer. When you are rested, clear, and in touch with yourself, you are better for everyone around you. More patient, more honest, more genuinely there. So choosing solitude is not a selfish act. It's a responsible one. Even small things count. A morning walk with no phone, 10 minutes of silence before the house wakes up, an afternoon drive with the radio off, a Sunday afternoon where you don't owe anyone anything. These are not luxuries, they're necessities, especially at this stage of life, because the question isn't just, how do I keep going? The question is, who am I, and what do I want from the years I still have? You can't answer that question in the middle of noise and obligation. You can only answer it in the quiet. And the quiet is always there, waiting. You just have to choose it. Does this sound familiar? That feeling of knowing you need rest, but not knowing how to give it to yourself? But there's something deeper that happens when you finally do.
Here's something nobody talks about enough. When you spend real time alone, not scrolling, not sleeping, not watching something, you start to feel more like yourself. Not a younger version of yourself, not someone different, just more you, more settled, more sure of what you think and feel. And that matters enormously. Because a lot of people over 45 say they feel like they've lost themselves somewhere along the way. They're not sure exactly when it happened. Maybe it was when the kids were small and everything was about them. Maybe it was when work took over and there was no space for anything else. Maybe it was a long relationship that slowly, quietly asked them to become someone slightly different. However it happened, and it happens to so many people, there comes a point where you look in the mirror and you're not quite sure who's looking back. Not in a dramatic way, just a quiet uncertainty, a sense of not being fully at home in your own life.
Solitude helps with this. Not all at once, not overnight, but slowly, with time. Because when you sit with yourself, when you stop performing, stop managing, stop being what everyone needs you to be, what's left is you. The actual you. The one that was there before all the roles, before the responsibilities, before the years of putting everyone else first. And that person is still there, maybe quieter than before, maybe a little tired, but there. You start to remember things you used to love, small things, a kind of music, a kind of food, a place you used to go, a way you used to feel on a Sunday morning. Little pieces of yourself that got buried under the noise of life. And as you spend more time in that quiet, those pieces come back. Not all at once, gently, like things slowly coming into focus. This is not about becoming someone new. It's about remembering who you already are. And there's something deeply good about that. Something calming. Something that makes the rest of life feel a little more solid, a little more real. Have you felt that? That sense of wanting to come back to something in yourself that you've been away from for a while? But here's the part most people get wrong, and it's holding them back. Let me be honest with you about something. Choosing solitude is not always comfortable at first. In fact, for many people, the first few times they really sit alone, without anything to do, without any distraction, it feels strange, maybe even a little difficult. Old thoughts come up, unfinished feelings, worries that have been waiting patiently, things you never quite dealt with. And the instinct is to run, to reach for the phone, to put something on in the background, to find a reason to get up and do something. That instinct is normal, it's human. And it doesn't mean solitude is bad for you. It just means you're not used to it yet. Think of it this way. If you've been running for a long time, and then you finally stop, your body doesn't know what to do. It's still ready to go, still tense, still waiting for the next thing. It takes a moment to slow down, to let the stillness settle. That's what the beginning of solitude feels like. A kind of restless adjustment, a small resistance. But if you stay with it, if you don't immediately run, something starts to happen. The restlessness softens, the thoughts slow down, and a quieter feeling starts to come in. Not perfect calm, not some kind of bliss, just a little more space, a little more ease. And that feeling grows. The more time you spend in it, the more familiar it becomes. Until one day, quiet doesn't feel like a problem anymore. It feels like a place you want to come back to. That's when things really start to change. Because once you're not afraid of being alone, once you're not running from yourself, you stop making decisions out of fear. You stop filling your life with things and people just to avoid the quiet. You start choosing, really choosing, what you want, who you want around you, how you want to spend your time. And the choices you make from that place, from real quiet, from real knowing yourself, are almost always better than the choices you make in a hurry, out of habit, or just to keep busy. Does this sound like something you'd be willing to try? Even for 10 minutes a day? And it gets clearer once you see how simple this really is. So let's bring this together. We started today with a feeling that a lot of people know. That discomfort with silence. That need to fill every quiet moment with noise, with tasks, with something. And we talked about why that happens. Not because you're weak or broken, but because most of us were never taught that being alone is something good, something useful, something worth choosing. We talked about the difference between loneliness and solitude. One is something that happens to you. The other is something you choose for yourself. We talked about how quiet is where your own voice lives, where your real thoughts are, where the truth about what you want and who you are can finally be heard. And we talked about how solitude isn't selfish. It's one of the most honest things you can do for yourself and for everyone around you. None of this is complicated. None of this requires any special skill or training or knowledge. It just requires a small decision to sit down, to be still, to let the noise stop, even for a few minutes, and to trust that what's there in the quiet is not something to be afraid of, because what's there is you. Not the you who is always on, always managing, always needed, but the real you, the one who has opinions and feelings and memories and hopes, the one who has been waiting patiently for you to slow down. That version of you doesn't ask for much, just a little time, a little quiet, a little willingness to sit with yourself without judging or rushing or filling the space. And when you give yourself that, even imperfectly, even just sometimes, something changes. You feel more grounded, more clear, more sure of who you are and what matters to you. That's not a small thing. That's everything. You are, at this point in your life, someone who has earned the right to know yourself, to be with yourself, to choose quiet without guilt. So let yourself have it. The quiet is not empty. It's full of you. And you are worth getting to know. If this message helped you, subscribe so you don't miss the next reflection. Leave a like and share this with someone who needs to hear this today.